Greetings, humans, and welcome back. Joey Pigtails here, and this is Vlog 22 coming to you from Daytona Beach Racing and Card Club, where the Moneymaker Tour is in town and the local players are out in force in search of one of those Moneymaker Tour trophies. I've decided to start my journey with a $300 PLO event, number 3, with a $5,000 guarantee. It's a 20K starting stack, and the structure is on the quick side, so this will be interesting. This is the first of 2 videos, with this one focusing on the journey to the final 8 players, and the second coming out shortly with the final table play. My goal with these 2 videos is to give you an intimate look at what a PLO event feels like from start to finish, and to highlight a variety of strategy concepts along the way. One thing to look out for here is that I consistently felt like I was overfolding both pre-flop and post-flop, although from looking at results and ICM considerations, perhaps I was onto something. One strategy point to consider that may seem a little odd to those who haven't played PLO events is limping is a thing. You're going to see a lot of players limp a variety of hands, and this is actually correct on a theory basis, and I'll be pointing out some of these out and explaining why along the way. Pots can get really big really quickly, so we want to see cheap flops with quality hands in position and flop some robust equity. Anywho, let's jump into the action because there's plenty of it, and we'll talk about my live stream plans afterwards. Here's one of those examples. We don't expect folds if we raise pre-flop from the small blind, so let's keep it cheap with this decent but vulnerable hand. We're 4 ways to a flop of 9-9-2 rainbow. We have top trips, but this is a way ahead, way behind situation. I bet 500 to see which side I'm on, ended up taking this one down. The very next hand we see the same thing, a limp to me, and I limp this hand that has some possibilities. Again, we're 4 ways to a flop, which comes ace, 9, 3, 1 club. It's checked around to me, and this board is really dry, so I go ahead and bet 500 with my 2 pair, and I see 2 calls. The turn is the 6 of clubs, which helps my hand a little. It's checked around to me, and perhaps I can bet, but I like to check here. What do you all think? Is this a bet? The river is the 2 of spades, and it's not exactly ideal as bottom and wraps now get there. When checked to, I go ahead and check this back, and my 2 pair are in fact good. From under the gun, I open king, king, deuce, deuce with hearts to 600, which sees 3 calls, including the button and the big blind. With a flop of 3, 9, queen, all hearts, I flop number 2, which is kinda cool. In these situations being mostly out of position, I prefer to check. The nut flush will usually bet, letting us off the hook, but in the absence of a bet, we're usually good here to proceed accordingly. With the 7 of hearts on the turn, I'm pretty sure I'm ahead right now. The player on my right now bets 2,700 into 3,300, and I call, as does another player. With the river of the 9 of clubs, we see a really bad run out. Hands like queen 9 that stuck around on the turn got there. It's checked around though, and my flush is good to win this one. The player on my right had jack 10 of hearts, so he needed that 8 of hearts to win this hand. Here is my first ace-ace combo of the day, as well as my first 3-bet. Given the multi-way nature of this game, it is ideal to isolate with the worst of the ace-ace combos we see like this. I happen to be in position this time, but we may look to try and limp re-raise this specific combo if we were out of position. So there's an open from the player on my right to 800 over the 300 big blind, and I go ahead and 3-bet to 2,500, a nice round number that makes it easy for the other players to call and for the dealer to make change. And only the initial raiser makes the call. With a flop of queen 8, 3, 2 diamonds, I flop a nut flush draw and an overpair on a disconnected board. So I go ahead and bet 3,000 when checked to, looking for value from worse diamond draws or top pair type hands looking to improve, and my opponent ends up folding. From under the gun, I look down at ace jack 10 9 Badoogie. We ideally want to have a suit with this hand, but having 4 cards higher than a 9 is still good, and I open to 1,000. After seeing everyone except the blind's call, we see a flop of queen 9 8 2 clubs. It's checked to me, and the player on my left now acts out of turn, bets 1,500. This is a weird spot. The game theory optimal play is to check, let the bet stand, hope for more action behind, and then bomb it. But I also see that as being kind of douchey for some reason. I need to get over that, though, as my nutted hand is vulnerable, and I would have bet more here. I let the bet stand by checking, and it's folded around to me. I go ahead and call, as I'm looking for more value here since I block the flush draw. The turn is the 2 of diamonds, and I set the check trap, My opponent steps into it with a bet of 2,500, and I'm hoping 2 bets means that he's willing to get it in here. So I go ahead and check raise pot the turn to 15,300, but he folds rather quickly. I just won a big hand opening ace-king 8-8-1 suit, flopping an ace and a flush draw and barreling 2 streets with it, but the footage was accidentally deleted by this clumsy guy right here, but that's why my stack is noticeably bigger this hand. This hand I'm in the big blind and defend this somewhat questionable combo to a raise of 1,500. The flop comes Jack 8-4 rainbow, and I check and flow. This is a board that favors my defend range, and I have 8 outs to the nuts plus backdoor potential, so maybe a lead was in order? Our opponent bets 3k, and I go ahead and make the call. The turn is the 2 of clubs, and that doesn't help. I check and end up folding to a decent sized bet on, and we move on. Now at the 500 blind level, we see an open of 1,500, and I elect to defend with this pretty hand from the small blind. We're heads up to a flop of 3-4-6 2 clubs. I have a gut shot and a jack-high club draw, and since our opponent opened, his range is weighted towards big pairs and flush draws. I check and flow to see a bet of 1,500 and throw out a call. The turn is a 7 of diamonds, and my hand now improves slightly, but more like I pick up more ways to win versus one pair hands. I check, and our opponent checks it back. The river is the 2 of clubs, and I've basically picked up a bluff catcher here. Our opponent bets 5k, and while I can be behind, I'm ahead of the dry guy. I'm not in bad shape if I call and lose this hand, but winning it puts me in a great position, so I go ahead and make the call, and our opponent did have aces with the dry ace of clubs, and I chip up nicely. Seeing an open of 1,500 in front of me, I make the call with ace-queen 10-3 double suited on the button, and we're heads up to a flop of 10-10-4. Top trips, baby. Our opponent pots it, I jam, and she goes ahead and calls off for her last 7,700. She has king-king 9-9 and is drawing pretty thin, but you know how PLO works. There's a king on the turn, and I'm now drawing a 1 out to win this, which doesn't come. Still sitting on around 25k or so. In the next hand, we have some blind-on-blind violence. My opponent pots it to 1,800 when it's folded to him, and I defend with queen 10-6-6 with hearts. It's a little bit wide, but we can't fold everything. With a flop of ace 9-7 with 2 hearts, I flopped a gut shot and a heart draw. Our opponent now down bets to 1,500, and I want to see a turn card, which comes the 4 of clubs. Ew. I'd love to see a free river, and thankfully, my opponent feels the same. That river comes the 5 of hearts, and here's another bluff catcher situation. Our opponent now bets 5k, and I shrug call. They show kings with the king of hearts, but I didn't see the other 2 cards, and I end up taking this one down. From the button, I see a limp in front of me, and I limp this decent starting combo. The blinds come along, and we see a flop of king, queen, 6, 2 diamonds. It's checked around to me, and I bet 2,500 into 4,000, which sees 1 call from the small blind. The turn is the ace of spades, and I really can't ask for anything more here. Maybe I got a little bit greedy, but I bet 6k on the turn, and our opponent folded. What do you all think? Should I have bet smaller? The camera was acting up, so forgive the glitching. The next hand I open ace king jack 7 3 clubs to 2k from under the gun, which sees 2 calls. With a flop of ace 8 4 2 diamonds, I can rep ace ace here, so in check 2, I bet 4,000. My opponent on my left now raises to 10,000, and this is an odd spot. He knows I can have ace ace a lot here, and he's essentially saying he's ready to get it all in. Having just a pair in backdoors, this isn't a hand to lose my mind with, even if I happen to be ahead at this moment in time. I did catch the jack of diamonds flash when my opponent folded, so he at least had that draw, if not more equity. We're short-handed, and the player on my right min-raises to 1,600. I call on the button with ugly kings, and the big blind completes as well. With 6,000 in, we see a flop of jack 4-2 rainbow. The board is pretty dry, and it's checked around. The turn is the 9 of clubs, and our opponent now bets 1,600 when checked 2. That's a great price for my hand, so I go ahead and make the call, and we're heads up to the river of the 2 of hearts. I guess that's one way to back into a hand, huh? Our opponent checks, and I go ahead and bet 5k for value, and he folds. In the next hand, I look down at some pretty decent aces and open at 2,000. Our friend Shane has just sat down on my left with a massive stack of chips and immediately 3-bets to 7,000. It's folded around to me, and I repot it, he repots it again, and we're all in. Shane has the other two aces, and we all know how this ends. It's a chop the vast majority of the time. Of course, this isn't the vast majority of the time, as I just go ahead and flop the nuts straight on Jack 9-7 Rainbow and double up through my friend. Thanks, buddy. The next hand, there is one limp to me, and I limp the button with Ace King 9-8 3 diamonds, and both blinds come along as well. With a flop of King Jack 5-1 diamond, I've got a little something, but not much, and it's checked around. The turn is the 10 of diamonds, and wow, just wow. Shane bets 3,500, and I make that call, looking for the good half of the deck to hit. The river is the king of clubs, and Shane turned Broadway and stayed ahead, so he gets a little bit back. In the next hand, I look down at a monster, Ace King 4 with nut hearts. There's a limp, then the player on my right pots it to 4,500. I go ahead and raise to 15k from the button. Shane calls from the small blind, and the original raiser folds. With 38k in, we see a flop of Queen Jack 10 all diamonds. I flopped Broadway, and I have the dry guy nut flush blocker. When check to, I down bet to 10k, and Shane comes along. The turn is the 8 of hearts, and when Shane checks, I take that fold equity and jam my stack in there. Thankfully, Shane shows me the king of diamonds and folds what was probably the better hand. I go ahead and show the ace of diamonds to make him feel a little better about the fold, and we move on with a much larger stack. There hasn't been very many interesting hands for the last couple of orbits, lots of small wins and losses. We're down to about 11 at this point and working towards the final table when I look down at a decent ace-ace combo without suits and open to 4k, which sees calls from the button and the small blind. With a flop of Queen 9-4 2 diamonds, I don't have much to work with here, and we all check around to the turn of the 10 of spades. I now have a gut shot, but not much else. Small blind and I check to the button who bets 15k, and we both fold. This hand we pick up the action on the flop. I'm in the big blind, so I must have been getting some sort of price to call, as there's a bunch of chips in the middle and we're 4 ways. I flop a number 2 straight and a queen high flush draw here, but I check to evaluate since I'm out of position and it's checked through. The turn is the 6 of spades and my hand is improved, but I'm still unsure where I'm at here. I check and it's checked around, making me feel much better. The river's the king of clubs and I bet 6k for value and get just one crying call from my sticky friend on my left. Only 5 players get paid, but we're down to 10 and getting close to combining for the final table, so players are playing tight and hands are moving fast. It's folded to me in the small blind, and I decide to limp this nice hand, and Shane checks his option. With a flop of Ace-Jack 6-2 diamonds, I flopped everything here. I go ahead and fire 4k into 6k, and Shane makes the call. The turn is the 3 of clubs, which is pretty safe, and I bet 10k for value, which our sticky friend again obliges. The river is the king of diamonds giving me the nuts, and I settle on 15k hoping for a crying call, and instead get greeted by a snap call, which means I should have bet more. Way more. I roll over the nuts and chip up a little bit more. Shortly after the last hand, 2 players busted, and we combine down to the final 8 players. How will this end? Will I make it into the money and capture my first MoneyMaker Tour title? Find out in Vlog 23, which is coming out shortly. Some of you may have tuned in to my live stream yesterday where I worked on graphics and had some great conversation. I'll be doing this with each vlog I make as it's a great chance to get to know you all better and talk about life. The next one will be tomorrow as I'll be working on graphics for the final table vlog, and in the future you'll get notifications on YouTube as I'll schedule them once I'm sure I can commit to the timing. Thanks again for stopping by and spending some time with me. I'm Joey Pigtails and I am transparent, reminding you to be a good human. Bye!